CBS 46 News presents Public Affairs on Peach.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Public Affairs on Peach. I'm Brittany Miller.
Sitting there texting when you went by. White van texting. Black Toyota texting.
Texting and driving may be illegal in Georgia, but that does not mean people are obeying the law. CBS 46 Traffic Solutions reporter Vince Sims went out looking for some violators and had no trouble finding them.
How often do you see people on their phones texting while driving?
I see it all the time.
Often, especially in Atlanta traffic.
Texting and driving is an issue that doesn't seem to be going away, even though it's against the law.
You know, it's against the law, but a lot of people do it. I don't think they mean to break the law, but we don't see it as a crime.
We wanted to see just how bad it is out there, people texting and driving, so we got behind the wheel and we started driving to see how many people we saw doing it. We didn't have to drive far to find offenders, people driving and messing with their phones. We also found people stopped at red lights on their phones, something that can jam up traffic if they don't see the light turn green. Cobb County Police tell me texting and driving is very dangerous.
We've investigated several fatality crashes where we believe that texting or another type of distraction is to blame.
Officer Pete Jones says texting and driving is just as dangerous as drunk driving.
When we're behind a driver who's texting, they show all the characteristics of an impaired driver. For instance, failing to maintain their lane, swerving, not reacting to red lights.
That's why Cobb County Police has assisted other agencies with undercover stings posing as construction workers to catch people texting and driving. Even stopped at a red light, it's against the law to text.
You're still considered to be operating the vehicle on the roadway, and that's all the law says is you cannot do these things while operating a vehicle on a public roadway.
Why don't they ban cell phone use entirely in your car?
Now, we're going to discuss numerous aspects of texting during the next half hour, but we begin with texting and driving. My guest right here is Brian Mixon from the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. So I guess I want to get right to it. How dangerous is it to text and drive? We hear it all the time, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that when you actually are engaging in some activity other than driving and it's distracting you from operating that motor vehicle, it exponentially increases your opportunity of being in a crash because your reactionary time is slowed. Like it's not rocket science. Like when you're engaging in a cognitive distraction or a visual distraction or a manual distraction, it adds, on average, if you say with a regular text message, 4.5 to 5 seconds to send that message. A lot of people feel like they can multitask while driving. Multitasking is really a myth. What we do is we do serial tasking, where we go from one task to the other very, very quickly. When we engage in some type of distraction, it slows that down so that our response time, if you go 4.5 to 5 seconds at 55 miles an hour, you're going to travel greater than the distance of a football field. Mm-hmm. If you're engaged in a distraction, you're basically driving blindfolded. That may not be a problem on a football field when no one else is around, but if you're in metro traffic or you're on a 2-lane road and you got changing road conditions or people pulling in front of you or animals or people stopping, it leads to crashes.
You need to be aware the whole time.
Absolutely.
So why not ban cell phones altogether? Because we can use them for the GPS and we can also talk on our cell phones here in Georgia.
Yes. It depends on the state legislators. Georgia's law was modified in 2010, really when text messages became important. Our distracted driving law actually was originated in 1990. In 2010 it was modified and it literally goes in and addresses telecommunication devices. Our state law says you can't engage your telecommunication device for anything other than sending and receiving a phone call if you're over the age of 18 and have a Class C license. If you're under the age of 18 with a Class D license, you can't use your phone at all except for to report an emergency.
So we have some stats here. Gwinnett Police told us the number of texting and driving citations they handed out went from 1,500 in 2014 to 2,400 in 2016. Is there a cross-section of our population that's doing this?
Yeah, we would love, I think as older drivers, we tend to think, well, we're much better at it. The reality is the older the driver that engages in distraction, the more likelihood that there's a crash. Mm-hmm. There are stats and data that would insinuate that younger drivers engage in that distraction more, which is not really surprising considering they do send and receive text messages mm-hmm. more. But the distraction really has no boundaries. It has nothing to do with socioeconomics, the type of vehicle that you drive, what you do. I mean, it really is it's a cultural phenomenon that we're struggling with.
And you brought up a good point when we were talking off camera that even when you use your GPS, that is almost a form of texting and driving if you're doing it while you're actually driving?
Yeah, the distractions, the visual, manual, and cognitive distractions, even if you're manipulating your phone to change the GPS on it, those distractions are still present. So you're still putting yourself and others at risk. One of the most difficult things to understand is that, unfortunately, not all the time the people who get hurt are the people who engage in the action. When you're engaging in that, if you were to think that you're actually putting at risk children and families that are along beside you on the roadway, most people would never ever want to hurt another person while they're driving. So they engage in a behavior not realizing that the risk that they're not only putting themselves and their passengers in, but other people on the roadways.
So, Brian, let me ask you, what is it going to take for people to take texting and driving seriously and realize how dangerous it is?
That's $1 million question. Like we literally are constantly trying to come up with ways to educate the public. There are state laws and there are agencies who are beginning to engage more and more citations. But the reality is we're not gonna write our way out of this with tickets. It has to be something as a culture that we say that this is a behavior that's not acceptable. Like, it's avoidable. Probably the biggest hope in this whole thing, even though our crashes and our fatalities are skyrocketing, the biggest hope is that this is a behavior that we choose as a society whether or not we deal with it or not. We can choose not to. It's not something we can't avoid. We can stop it.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate you guys doing this.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. When Public Affairs on Peach returns, I will talk with another Georgia police officer who has a personal reason for wanting people to stop texting and driving. Stay with us.